This presentation is going to talk about dirty work and if the way work is organized and rewarded limits the effects of stigma or dirtiness associated with work. A presentation for contemporary issues in management written by
Ellie Lawrence, Fedrin Hain,
and Gaideli Talipova.
Here is a brief outline of what this presentation will contain. The definitions of what dirty work is and examples. Then will come our case studies, which will look at dirty work through domestic labor and slaughterhouses. We will then look at the tactics used in organizations to combat stigma in dirty work. Finally, our presentation will examine a personal experience of dirty work through waitressing and how, as a real-life example, tactics have been used to remove the stigma and dirtiness associated with the work.
What is dirty work? The term dirty work was first coined by Everett Hughes in 1951 and is used to describe tasks and occupations that are likely to be perceived as disgusting or degrading. Ashworth and Kreiner, 1999, also write that people who perform dirty work tend to become stigmatized as society projects the negative characteristics associated with their occupation on them, depicting them as dirty workers. The nature of the work that dirty work describes are the jobs that we as citizens do not want to do. There is a distinct feeling amongst many that we are too good for these jobs, and that to do them would cause us to fall in the rankings of the wider society. Because the work is dirty, those doing the jobs thus become dirty workers. In other words, they become what they do. More obvious dirty occupations include morticians, prostitutes, slaughterhouse workers, and domestic labourers. However, there are a number of less obvious occupations, such as being in the police force and even bankers. These jobs have been identified as dirty work because of their associated taint, which will be discussed in the next slide. Stigmatization of dirty work. Shardle, 2014, states that stigma is a relationship of devaluation in which one individual is disqualified from full social acceptance, meaning that if a person is stigmatized, then they are viewed as a lesser person in the context of wider society. This stigmatization is a very common factor in the realm of dirty work because of the nature of the work in question. Hughes, in 1951, identified three categories of taint within dirty work: physical, social, and moral, and it is because of these associated taints that this work has become stigmatized. Society may see these jobs as physically dirty, socially immoral, or morally wrong, and these socially constructed associations have left dirty work and dirty workers heavily stigmatized. The gender stigmatization of dirty work is very real. Some jobs are seen as female jobs, such as domestic labor, whilst others are viewed as overtly male, such as working in an abattoir. However, should a person be working in the wrong job for their gender, then stigmatization may be even more pronounced. Another reason that these workers are often victimized is because of the low skill and low pay nature of the work. The low skilled nature of dirty work will leave society judging those who do it as uneducated and unable to do anything else, and the low pay makes the work even more undesirable. The diagram displayed on this slide is that of a Venn diagram that shows the three forms of taint and stigma that dirty work is associated with: social, physical, and moral. As you can see, there are specific occupations that are tainted by two or even three forms of stigma, and the stronger the taint, the more impact on the stigmatization of both the individual and the occupation. It is also a good example of the different and possibly surprising occupations that may be considered dirty, such as garbage collectors, bounty hunters, gun shop owners, and even professional gamblers. How would you describe yourself? Who are you? These philosophical questions underline the importance of a person's profession, which is, according to Thompson and Harrod, is one of the most important elements of his or her personal and social identity. To the question, who are you, people reply with, I'm a doctor, I'm a CEO. Both suggest prestigious positions in society, high status, power, and salary. On the other hand, professions such as prostitute or magician suggest taint, shame, and disgust. How often do we hear those professions being spoken of in a proud manner? You might be happy to tell everyone that you are a successful surgeon or a Hollywood actor, but when your occupation has a physical, social, moral taint stigma attached to it,
by society, you might want to identify yourself outside of your career or describe it in a more socially acceptable way.
Dirty work and domestic labour. Domestic labour is seen by many as a very undesirable occupation because of its intense physical labour and the fact that it is often completed by low-skilled individuals. Throughout history, domestic labour has been very gendered, and the idea of domesticity means that women have hired in help in order to be domestic without becoming dirty themselves. This has created large social gaps between those that can afford to pay for it and those that cannot afford not to do it. Why is it dirty? Domestic labour is seen as being both socially and physically tainted. The social taint is related to aspects such as the servile relationship between the employee and the employer, a relationship founded on the idea of slavery, where the employee does everything their employer tells them to. The unskilled and low-paid nature of the job also makes it very socially tainted. The physical taint of this job is what most people would think of as dirty work. There is large amounts of physical labour and the job is associated with dirt handling, such as waste contact, cooking and cleaning. The combination of these taints creates what is seen as low occupational prestige, resulting in the stigmatization of domestic labourers as dirty workers and the job itself being identified as dirty and highly undesirable. The way in which dirty work is organised can indeed have an impact on the stigma associated with this work, and these tactics will be spoken about later on in the presentation.
Dirty work and slaughterhouse. The slaughterhouse is a particularly fine example of space where dirty work is carried out because it has both tangible and symbolic dirt. The symbolic dirt that can be found are stigma, shame, lack of esteem, secrecy, violence, killing, social contact with stigmatized people, and immorality. Whereas the tangible dirt, for instance, are blood and body parts, mess, rubbish, smells, death, or perhaps again physical contact with stigmatized people. Also, the secretive nature of the slaughterhouse has contributed to its perceived stigma through events such as the UK horse meat scandal. Classic studies like Ackroyd and Crowdy's 1990 study stated that the work was strongly team-based and that such teams had developed a high degree of autonomy from close supervision. Also, in fact, they argued that the process was a highly masculine environment involving heavy physical work and toughness. This gave workers a degree of pride on account of such toughness and self-sacrifice, a view subsequently endorsed by Ashworth and Kreiner 1999. Who argued that the stigma of dirtiness often fosters relatively strong occupational and work group cultures. Ackroyd and Crowdy in 1990 highlighted how slaughtermen develop a distinctive occupational culture based on aggressive realism, where debris from blood and gore was often worn on clothing such as a source of masculine pride. Men accordingly mobilize masculine distinctiveness based upon a special ability to endure the tainted aspects of the job. The behavior Ackroyd and Crowdy observed was argued to have little to do with technological factors. Managerial control was considered to be relatively unproblematic due to the strong team culture and the absence of division and resistance. Hamilton and McCabe's ethnography and people writing research on a chicken factory, farm stock, however, found that there was far more individualizing than close-knit culture. No chit-chats, conflicts, and resistance. Factory was surprisingly fairly clean and killing was apparently painless, and they almost felt like they were watching robots at work. They also observed that only inspectors and vets speak up more and could also take breaks and walk around more. There was extremely limited evidence of group identity among line workers and meat inspectors. They had very little opportunity for close contact with each other or those at farm stock. Different groups experienced dirt differently. It was said that directors had no physical but some symbolic dirt, such as hiring and firing, whereas quality inspectors have some physical contact with body parts, blood, and some symbolic dirt. On the other hand, line workers are highly polluted.
Battling stigma. People deal with dirt and taint of their occupation in different ways. Basing on the example case studies that we have discussed earlier, we can see that the ways employees were dealing with occupational taint was different. For Slaughterhouse case study by Ackroyd and Crowd, they said that the team culture and close supervision helped them to deal with society perceiving their roles as dirty and disgusting. For the study by Hamilton and McCabe on Chicken Factory, it was different, and silence was the way employees dealt with the nature of their work due to language barriers between foreign line workers and use of protective earplugs, limiting the conversation to lunchtime and after work when everybody would rush home. Believing that the job you do is essential in the local community adds to fulfillment and the job satisfaction and helps to minimize the dirt of the individual for the individual employee. This could be seen in waste disposal occupations as well as the professions associated with sex. Other ways that dirty workers could cope with stigma is trying to build a sense of a self outside of your career by pursuing a hobby or a weekend activity. Get creative, draw, or write. Getting professional help from counseling and active listening services of professional growth is not uncommon. In 2007, Ashforth with her team published a paper on normalization tactics based on the ways managers and employees deal with occupational taint. This was based on their joint work with Craner in 1999 when they derived so-called managerial tactics of coping and dealing with stigma. The original three were reframing, refocusing, and recalibrating, which have their slight differences and still remain in the study. Social buffers, confronting and defensive, with their divisions behavioral, physical, and cognitive, have been added to the most recent paper. These come from real-life experiences of managers from 40 different occupations, such as morticians, exterminators, and counselors. It has been noted that commitment and performance was significantly reduced in individual employees who weren't able to deal with stigmatization associated with the work, and as management is responsible for the way work is organized and performed, it is their duty to ensure that employees are not left in deep well and without help and guidance on how to reduce occupational stigma. Although an example of Slaughterhouse study where management had a minimal involvement in the matter of battling stigma, due to the nature of the job, workers managed to deal with it on their own level, helping each other and creating a team culture and close supervision. It is important to note that not all jobs could have the same work environment where exaggeration of their gender was the way to deal with stigma. In other words, exaggeration of their masculinity through toughness and brutality. A more recent example that could provide an argument for management in this study by Hamilton and McCabe of the Chicken Factory, where monetary reward weren't enough for local job seekers, so they had to invite people from other countries to fill the essential jobs. When looking at the example of domestic labor, there are very few tangible rewards. A study by Stacey in 2005 that looked at care home workers found that the most beneficial way of rewarding employees would be by creating a meaning to the job that would in turn increase the satisfaction from it. The feeling that what they're doing is a good thing not only for those they're caring but for the wider society would help with regards of associated dirtiness of the job. Her study found that rewards stem from three main sources: practical autonomy, the creation of skills portfolio, and physically doing the work. Practical autonomy means that there is a degree of freedom granted to these workers. Creation of skills portfolio comes from gaining transferable skills and caring for people that they would not otherwise have gained. Finally, doing the dirty work itself, impersonal bonds between the carers and patients are formed by creating unique caregiving relationships that have the ability to instill a real sense of meaning to the worker. There are, however, three important barriers to rewards to creating meaningful work as a caregiver. These are overwork, increased risk, and physical and emotional strain. If one is overworked, the job becomes too tiring to be rewarding. When working as care home worker, there is an element of increased risk due to the fact that you're essentially in charge of people's lives. This can lead to the fear of doing something wrong, which could act as a substantial barrier to gaining the intangible rewards. Working as a carer is physically tiring, with high levels of manual labor, often creating problems such as muscle injuries and pain. The emotional strain can come through the failure to connect with the patients, or at the other end of the spectrum, over investing in them and becoming too emotionally attached. Therefore, it can be seen that there is a clear managerial reward system that helps employees deal with difficulties of domestic labour and care home workers in our example. However, sometimes workers aren't able to benefit from these rewards due to the barriers discussed above.
So where does an unvalued worker find a sense of identity? McCabe and Hamilton stated that dirty work may become even dirtier, at least in the public's perception, if it is linked to low pay, poor conditions of employment, domestic unemployment, and an outsider status. In the case of the slaughterhouse, there is little left to draw upon in a meaningful sense of self at work when the resources are few culturally. Economies like the UK, these jobs have become so undesirable that few but migrants do them. These jobs are unwanted because they are the most low status, low skilled and low paid, and as such are socially tainting. Trades Union Council in the UK found migrants working in poor conditions, often living together, undertaking labour with the lowest prospects, lowest social worth and poorest wages, and at the same time often experiencing racism and discrimination. These factors negatively influence the working lives and self-esteem of migrants. Aykroyd and Crowdy 1993 stated that certain aspects of the work could be turned from dirty to skillful, in particular the use of knives and heavy equipment and dangerous process. However, in reality, now factories use machines to operate and no longer need masculinity as discussed earlier. So increasing the salary of the workers in slaughterhouse may make a slight difference for them to feel more valued. This is because I found that a refused collector's salary is more than the meat process workers, as both meat process worker and refused collectors do not need any particular qualifications to start in their jobs. But in fact, some employers may prefer meat process workers to have some GCSEs. Therefore, there is no clear ways that management help employees overcome stigma.
This next section will introduce a personal experience of dirty work in the form of waitressing. Dirty work and waitressing. For many summers, I have worked in the hotel industry as a waitress. However, waitressing is one of those occupations that is considered to be dirty work. I have found that there is both a physical and social taint attached to the job. Physically, there is a lot of standing, walking, and carrying, making it very exhausting. As a waitress, one must also deal with the food waste, dirty dishes, and garbage bags, meaning that there are big elements of physical dirt within the job. The social taint here is seen through several different facets. As with many occupations, the low pay and low level of skill and education required makes it a job of low occupational prestige. The part-time nature of the job also produces a sense of work insecurity, making it work that many would be unwilling to do. The largest social taint, however, is the servile relationship between ourselves and the customers that we serve. Waitresses must cater for a customer's every need, and this can sometimes be very degrading, with certain expectations that their wish is our command. These assumptions can lead to mental exhaustion and does nothing but exemplify the servile nature of the job. There are, however, ways in which the work is organized in an attempt to lessen the low regard and stigma of the work. The biggest reward given is the tips, which, after an average week, can amount to over £50, and when it is compared to my hourly pay of £5.50, it then equates to around 10 hours of work. For me, the tangible rewards of the tips, the internal feeling of gratification from the social interaction with the customers and seeing them having enjoyed their experience is second to none. This is encouraged in my workplace, and we are never reprimanded for talking and interacting with customers. When people are enjoying themselves, and you can enjoy it with them, then it makes what you are doing feel so much more worth it. Another great tactic that the management have used to improve the individual feelings of identity within my work is offering certain people the opportunity to have professional training for working on a bar. This comes with the assumption that saying, "I work on the bar," or "I work as a cocktail maker," sounds much less stigmatizing than "I work as a waitress," or "I work as a food runner." All of these tactics are small, but they can prove to be very effective for reducing stigma when combined.
Questions. Which types of dirt or stigma are present in your experiences?
As seen through looking at the dirt and stigma within waitressing, it is clear to see there is both physical and social dirt associated with the job. Physical examples include such things as food waste, dirty dishes and garbage bags, and the social stigma is with regards to the so-called servile relationship that is associated with waitressing between customer and employee. This is based on customer expectations of their services and the caring nature of the job. Sexism and mental tiredness is not unheard of. Financial side of waitressing and the low skill association adds to the social dirt. Question number 2. Can organizations make a difference to wider views of stigma or only to perceptions held by individuals close to or doing the work?
It may be very hard for organizations to change the wider views of stigma because of the long associated taint of jobs. For example, exotic dancers have and will continue to be seen as dirty and wrong, while some managers may try normalization tactics and individuals might choose their own ways of dealing the taint of being associated with stigmatized work. There might be some impact on people who in some way or another is related to this situation. However, changes to wider social perceptions are much more difficult and there will be many who will never change their perceptions. Because of this, it may become harder for the individual doing the work to change their perceptions of their job because of what others think. And whatever organizations do may not be enough to change these feelings.